Paris, February 2019. Karl Lagerfeld is dead, and there will be no burial, no coffin, no grave. For 60 years, this man was photographed more than almost anyone alive, and when it ended, he left instructions that there was to be nothing left of him at all. Search every cemetery in France, in Germany, anywhere on Earth. His name is not on a single stone. He arranged that himself, years in advance, while he was still perfectly well. Now look at his hands. In almost every photograph taken in the last 30 years of his life, Karl Lagerfeld is wearing gloves. Black, fingerless, always on. He wore them indoors. He wore them at dinner. He never gave one tidy explanation for it. But there is a story he told 100 times, laughing in interview after interview. It happens in a large, cold house outside Hamburg in the 1940s. A woman looks at her small son and tells him that his hands are ugly and that he should keep them out of sight. He was a child. He believed her. And he was still believing her 60 years later in front of every camera in the world. That is the man underneath the empire. Not the sunglasses, not the $11 billion a year, not the 14 collections. A boy who was told he was wrong, and who spent his whole life quietly agreeing with her. To understand what he did with that, and why there is no grave, we have to go back to that house. He was born in Hamburg on the 10th of September, 1933. He spent the rest of his life insisting it was later and correcting anyone who checked. His father, Otto, ran the import company that had brought evaporated milk into Germany, the kind that came in tins and sat in every kitchen in the country. There was land. There were servants. There was money, and almost no warmth. His mother was Elizabeth. She was a former Berlin lingerie saleswoman who had married into the money, far younger than her husband, elegant, chain-smoking, and cruel in the particular way that some elegant people are. She delivered the wound in a light conversational voice and then changed the subject. Karl worshipped her. He also quoted her for the rest of his life with a kind of glittering pride. The line about his hands was one of many. She told him to stop talking because his voice bored her. She looked at a drawing he had made and told him it was nothing special. When he told her he was leaving for Paris, she gave him the line he repeated for the next 60 years. "There is nothing to do here," she said. "Germany is a dead country." So he went. He was still a teenager, and he did not come back. He would spend the rest of his life running from that house. He never once got out from under her. Before we follow him to Paris, thank you for being here. Truly. Films like this only reach anyone at all if people hit like and subscribe, and every person who does that is the reason the next one gets made. If you would rather listen, House of Ruin is on Spotify too. Because in Paris he is about to meet two men. One becomes the great rival of his life. The other one destroys him. 1954. A design competition run by the International Wool Secretariat. Lagerfeld won the coat category. The dress category was won by another unknown, a thin, nervous boy from Algeria named Yves Saint Laurent. The two of them stood together that night, both barely adults, both about to become the two most important designers in France. And they liked each other enormously. Hold on to that night. In 20 years it becomes poison. The prize brought him 3 years at Balmain, then Patou, cutting and draping in the back workrooms of the old Paris houses. And somewhere in there, he made one small decision that almost nobody noticed. The family name was spelled Lagerfeld, with a hard letter at the end. He dropped it. Lagerfeld, he explained later, sounded more commercial, sounded better. Sounded, though he never said this part out loud, like a name that had come from nowhere and belonged to no one. It was the first thing he erased. It was very far from the last. He never became famous the way Saint Laurent did. Saint Laurent was handed Dior at 21 and became a national event overnight, adored, photographed, and slowly destroyed by it. Lagerfeld took the colder road. He refused to put his own name on a door. He became the man other houses called when they were dying. He went to Chloe and made it the sharpest ready-to-wear label in Paris. In 1965, he went to Fendi in Rome and stayed 54 years, almost certainly the longest single job in fashion history. He drew their double F logo in seconds on a scrap of paper. Then, in the mid-70s, Chloe launched its first perfume while he was designing there. A heavy, sweet tuberose in a plain, rounded bottle, and it went everywhere. That bottle sat on dressing tables in London and Hamburg and Chicago. Millions of women wore his work on their skin every day and had no idea whose it was, because his name was nowhere on it. That was the arrangement he chose for himself. Everywhere, and anonymous. And then in 1983 came the offer everyone told him to refuse. Chanel was finished. Coco Chanel had died in 1971 in her suite at a Paris hotel, and the house on the Rue Cambon had curdled into a museum. Taking the job, people warned him, was like being hired to redecorate a mausoleum. He took it, and he treated the dead woman's archive with no respect whatsoever. He raided it. The tweed jacket, the chain strap, the interlocking double C. He blew them up, cheapened them, stuck them on jeans and swimsuits and motorcycle boots. Purists were appalled. The clothes flew out of the stores. Within a few years, the corpse was the most desirable name in luxury on earth. Then, he did all of it at once. Chanel, Fendi, and his own label. 14 collections a year for decades, while shooting the advertising himself. Work out what that number means. A finished collection every 3.5 weeks. No sabbatical, no break, no missed delivery, into his 80s. He gave the world a phrase for what he had turned himself into. "I am," he said, "a fashion machine." He said it as a boast. It was a confession. A machine has no past and no inner life. A machine is only its output. But all of that is the public man, the one who never broke character. There was another one. And in a Paris nightclub in 1971, that other man met the person who would take him apart. His name was Jacques de Bascher. By the time Jacques was finished, Lagerfeld would have lost the oldest friendship of his life, and the most controlled man in Europe would be sitting in a hospital chair with nothing left to design his way out of. De Bascher was 21, beautiful, and magnificently useless. He came from a small aristocratic family and inflated the title whenever it suited him. He wore capes and monocles in a decade of denim. He drank enormously, took whatever was handed to him, and treated Paris as a stage built for his amusement. Lagerfeld was 18 years older, worked 18 hours a day, and trusted nobody. He fell completely and permanently in love with him. What followed is one of the strangest arrangements in fashion history. Lagerfeld paid for everything, for 18 years. The studio, the parties, the clothes, the debts, the entire performance. They never lived together. And he said then, and for the rest of his life, that the two of them never once slept together. I infinitely loved that boy. he told a biographer decades later, but I had no physical contact with him. He never moved from that account. Not in 50 years. Not to anyone. The most powerful designer in Europe had built his whole emotional life around someone he had decided he would never be allowed to touch. And then, in 1973, Jacques did the thing that poisoned French fashion for 30 years. He began an affair with Yves Saint Laurent. Not a discreet one. A public, humiliating affair in front of the same small Paris world that had watched those two teenagers win a wool competition in 1954. Saint Laurent, already deep into the drinking and the pills, came apart over it. His partner, Pierre Berge, blamed Lagerfeld directly and never stopped. Not for the rest of his life. The two men who started on the same night, in the same room, became enemies who would not stand in the same building. Lagerfeld said almost nothing. "Of course I knew about the affair," he said later. "I only wanted to see the bright side of Jacques." Then he went back to work. That was always the method. Something would happen, and he would not process it, or discuss it, or grieve it. He would take it out of himself and file it somewhere it could not be reached. He was so practiced at this that when the real thing came for him, he had nothing left to defend himself with. Because Jacques got sick. He tested positive in 1984, at the height of the epidemic, in a Paris burying a generation of its young men. The illness worked through him over 5 years. Towards the end, he cut himself off from almost everyone, unable to bear what was happening to his face. Lagerfeld did not send money and stay away. He went to the hospital, and he stayed. He had an extra bed installed in the room. He slept beside him, night after night. The most controlled man in Europe sat in a hospital in Garches, west of Paris, holding the hand of a man he insisted he had never touched, and waited for him to die. Jacques de Bascher died on the 3rd of September, 1989. He was 38 years old. Lagerfeld went back to work almost immediately. Asked about it over the years, he offered one short, elegant line and changed the subject. He said he did not believe in looking back. He said memories were a waste of time. But in the years that followed, he bought a villa outside Hamburg, in the city he had escaped as a boy, and he named it Villa Jacques. Jacques was what he had always called Jacques. His mother Elizabeth had died 11 years earlier, in 1978. He kept her ashes in an urn, and then he decided that even his body was wrong. In 2001, he appeared in public having lost around 90 pounds in roughly a year on a severe medically supervised regime. He was open about why. A young designer named Hedi Slimane had started making very narrow menswear for Dior, and Lagerfeld wanted to wear it. That was the entire reason. He was approaching 70, and he took his own body apart to fit into clothes cut by a man half his age. Look at what was left standing. The sunglasses, which he almost never removed, and once described as his burqa. The high, stiff collar covering the neck, the powdered white ponytail, and the gloves. Still on. 60 years after a woman in Hamburg told a small boy that his hands were ugly and should be kept out of sight. He had spent his whole life replacing Karl Lagerfeld with a logo. The logo was flawless. It never aged, it never grieved, and it could produce 14 collections a year forever. He was still doing exactly that in early 2019, when he missed the end of a Chanel show for the first time in his working life. He was admitted to a hospital in Neuilly with pancreatic cancer, and he died on the 19th of February. He was 85, if the record is right, which he would have hated. And now the instructions make sense. Burial, he said, was horrible. I just want to disappear like the animals in the virgin forest. It is awful to encumber people with your remains. So there was no grave, because a grave is a fixed point that outlives you and holds your dates in stone. He was cremated privately, with only a handful of people there. And then there is the thing he had been keeping. When Jacques died in 1989, his ashes were divided. Half went to his family. Lagerfeld took the other half and hid it. He told the biographer Marie Otavi that he had put them somewhere secret, and that one day they would be added to his own. He kept that half for 30 years, through the Chanel years, through every show, every interview, every joke. A man who said the past was of no interest to him whatsoever had been carrying half of it around in an urn since 1989. And that is what he had asked for at the end. His own ashes, mixed with the two sets he had kept. His mother and Jacques. The woman who told him he was ugly, and the man he was never allowed to touch. Where they went has never been made public. The empire he left behind is almost too large to picture. Chanel, the museum he was told not to bother with, now turns over more than $11 billion a year. The tweed jacket he stole from a dead woman's archive is still, 4 decades on, one of the most copied garments in existence. He had proved that a dead name can be reborn if you treat its past as raw material instead of something sacred. Then he turned exactly the same method on himself. He edited his name, his age, his history, his body, and his grief, until there was nothing left that could be checked and nothing left that could be hurt. The houses he rescued will outlast every one of us. The man who rescued them made certain there is nowhere on earth you can go and stand and say his name out loud. If you got this far, subscribe, because there are a lot more of these coming, and everyone is hiding behind a logo you already recognize. Leave a comment and tell me what you think he was really protecting all those years. And come back for the next one, when we walk into another house that looked perfect from the street and find out exactly what was happening on the floors above.